Well, welcome everybody to the first of Connecting the World with Stories, a weekly magazine program at the World Storytelling Cafe. And it has been an amazing week. We've had we had we had Giles and James on, Giles Abbott and James Lyle on with on Saturday doing drawings with the stories. We had Justine Demir live, which was fantastic, and I'm just going up the list here. Nick Toksek and Georgiana from Romania, and that was brilliant. That was yesterday, and Romania has to have blown us all out of the water. It's brilliant. She was there in full costume with loads of traditional patterns behind her. And if you missed that set, go back to it. I can't get to everyone. Seth, with a really great set from you. Dave, brilliant today. And who we had this week? We've had Carl Merry, Pauline Cordner, Nana Tomova, Nick Toksek, Seth Townsend, Amy Douglas, Justine Demir, Vanessa Wolf, Tom Phillips, Giles Abbott and James Lyons, Georgiana Poppin. From Morocco, we've had Ajam Mohammed and Zakaria and Hannah Brailsford. What a lineup in 1 week. I mean, how good is that? We'll give them all a round of applause for amazing sets, I think. There we go. Yes. And next week we've got coming live. It just never stops. It just never stops. Tomorrow, Orla, who might still be with us, I think she's gone. Orla McGovern is on live tomorrow night. Do catch her. We've got Chip on Friday. And we've got Ian and Gary, which will be a completely anarchic set on Saturday night. And that's just the live stuff coming up. We've got Roger Stevens doing a mixture of poetry and stories tomorrow at 2. And of course, all sets are available on Catch Up. And all sets will have a little hat beneath. So, you know, just all our tellers that are in lockdown and not earning, drop something in the hat. Now, before we go on, we're going to do a different theme for these each week. It's kind of it's an experiment, and I'm hoping everyone I've asked is going to manage to get on. Gail, well done for being the first of my guests to actually work out the technology, and yeah, there's a few other people that I've Baden. You came up as a named person, and you're actually there. That's and Cass, Cass. Someone dropped out today, and Cass had to step in. So and she's coming in with a totally different and a new trickster to me, because today's theme is tricksters, and tricksters, as we know, appear over the whole world. And so I suppose we can discuss this later, but and you can disagree with me, because I've never known two storytellers that agreed on everything. There's a commonality of stories, but the diversions are even more interesting. And but I like one thing I love about stories is they're totally amoral. They're neither too good. They neither do things intentionally bad or intentionally good. They just do things. I mean, and there's always two ways to look at a trickster story. If we look at the best known nursery trickster story, which is Jack and the Beanstalk, and I use this as an example when I work in prisons. I say, you know, like in the story you're told in the nursery is a hero, but what did he do? He broke into the giant's gaff, he nicked everything he had, and when the giant chased after him, however much it was justified breaking into his place because of something happened earlier, what the giant do? The giant chases after him, and Jack kills him. I say, when I'm talking in prisons, I say the rest of you are banged up for that sort of thing. So there's and I love that double way of looking at tricksters. But I'm gonna shut up in a second, and I'm going to go to Gail, who has a Cherokee Trickster, and maybe Gail, you could tell us a little bit about your trickster before you actually start the story. Would that be possible?
Yes, it would be possible. I was going to do that anyway because so many of the stories that Native people here tell are about our animal relatives. And sometimes have been places where I'm telling a story about an animal and I realize the kids have absolutely no idea who that is. But Rabbit is our trickster. In Cherokee, you would say G-Stew. And G-Stew is the trickster because he's always in trouble. He talks all the time. Doesn't matter if he knows what he's talking about or not. That's not the point. The point is his voice sounds good. So he talks a lot. He loves to play tricks. He's one of those people who can only feel smart when he's making somebody else look foolish. A lot of the times his tricks backfire and he ends up hurting himself. Like the time he made Bear so mad, Bear reached out, grabbed that long, beautiful, bushy tail that Creator gave Rabbit and broke it off. That's how come you don't see rabbits with long, bushy tails. But sometimes his tricks work out just the way he wants them to. And this is one of those stories. You see, all of these stories come from the time when all creatures spoke the same language. And except for killing and eating each other, they got along pretty good. And what happened was Rabbit and Wolf went hunting. Like I said, that may sound odd to you, but neither had been doing a very good job of putting meat on their tables, and their wives were not happy with them. And when a Cherokee wife is not happy with you, your life is not good. So Rabbit and Wolf decided they would go out together and they would not come home until they could put meat on both their tables. Now they hunted all day long, and finally, late afternoon, they managed to kill one skinny, scrawny little cow. Wolf chased her until she was so tired she was stumbling. Rabbit popped up from behind a bush with a great big club. Whonk! Boom! The cow was dead. Now, Rabbit was looking at that cow. There wasn't going to be very much meat there by the time they skinned that cow and cut up the meat. There was really only going to be enough for one family. So Rabbit thought very quickly. He turned to Wolf. He said, "You did the hard work of chasing this cow so that I could kill her. I should do the hard work of skinning her and cutting up the meat. Look over there." And he pointed to the western sky. You know that red glow in the sky when the sun is going down? Rabbit said, "There's some people up there with a campfire. You run up there, borrow fire from those people, and when you come back, I will have everything ready. We'll cook the meat, divide it up, and go back home." Now, Wolf had never heard Rabbit offer to work hard, so he was very happy just to go and borrow fire. He ran up to the top of the hill. There were no people there. There was no fire. But that red glow was still there in the sky. So Wolf went down that ridge, up to the top of the next one. No people there, no fire. but that red glow was still there in the sky. So Wolf went chasing the sunset up and down the hills, and the light got smaller and smaller, and the sky was dark. Wolf said, those people must have put out their fire. Well, I'll go back and build a fire of my own. Now, as soon as Wolf had gone away, Rabbit had gotten very busy. He skinned that cow. He cut up the meat into strips. He wrapped all the meat up in that cowhide and hid it, swept that area clear, and he took the tail of that cow. He cut it off and he stuck the end of it down in the dirt. So when he saw Wolf coming back, he pretended to be pulling on that tail as hard as he could. Help, help, he said. This cow is jumping away under the ground. Well, Wolf saw that tail sticking up. He went over, he grabbed a hold of it, he gave a great big heave, and of course it popped right up. You are so strong, Rabbit said. You pulled her tail right off. Since I'm the one who let her jump underground, you should keep that. And then he went and found the bundle of meat. He took it home. He and his wife and children, they ate well that night. But Wolf and his family, they had a very poor supper because they were left with just the tail.
Well, thank you. That's a great start to our Trickster.
Yay.
I've got a question,
Well
and
done.
it
Yes.
always fascinates me when both in Cherokee stories and in African American stories, when you talk about rabbit, are you talking about like a little bunny rabbit with a fluffy tail, or are you talking about a jackrabbit?
Well, you know, these animals, the Cherokee people say that in the very beginning days of the world, all, like I said, all creatures spoke the same language, and the animals had a society that was like the Cherokee society, and they were large, more perfect, the original people. And through our stories, one by one, the original animal people go back up to live in the sky vault where they came from. And all of the animals we see now are their descendants. And of course, only a few people remember how to speak the animal language. So you'll see their physical characteristics sometimes change from story to story. But I'm guessing the West Texas jackrabbits that we have over here that are like the size of a Shetland pony, they are not in the eastern mountains where we came from. So I'm guessing it would be your average rabbit. And yes,
Okay.
that little fluffy bit of fur that he has on his tail, that's all that's left from where Bear broke it off. You know, every time something happens to change these animals, then that's a characteristic from then on.
Brilliant, brilliant. Because I mean, I was just thinking of it I mean, it makes it a totally different animal to the. I mean, I know they're a different animal because of different traditions of stories, but it's a different in our terms of our picturing it in here.
Well, you know, one
it's a
thing
totally-
that's really interesting, the African stories of Anansi, the Spider-Man, and Cherokee stories of Rabbit grew together to become the southern part of
Rabbit.
America, the folklore of the Brer Rabbit
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah,
Brer Rabbit is,
that's I'm thinking. It's like two traditions. Isn't
yeah,
it?
that's half
Because
Anansi, half Cherokee Rabbit.
so
Hey.
the jackrabbit here would be called a hare,
Yeah,
and in African stories, the hare is one of the hare, spider, and wild dog. I think are the three main tricksters. We'll have
right.
Baden's going to give us an Anansi story later. But I was kind of interested, in that, and those were all animals that were sort of half in the world of people and half in the world of, they were in where we lived really.
Yeah,
So
in the
yeah,
beginning days.
yeah. Oh, fantastic. Well, that join in the rest of the conversation, Gail.
I'm here.
Yeah. This isn't you're not done, but that was a great story to kick us off with. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I suppose we could follow, having mentioned Nancy. Baden, are you with us still? Let me get my gallery view up.
Yep, I'm
Yeah,
here.
you're there. You're there.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about Anansi, and then and then give us an Anansi story,
I would love.
and talk about where your particular island, your heritage, and so forth. So because the different stuff comes from different places.
Right. Well, first of all, I want to thank Gail for clearing something up for me that I've learned this afternoon, which is the link between Anansi and Brer Rabbit, because obviously the characters are almost interchangeable in some stories. But I've learned today how that link, or perhaps one of the ways in which that link came about. And thanks very much for that. As John said, I'm from Antigua in the Caribbean, although I've lived in England for too damn long now. As long as I can I came here when I was 15, and that was a long time ago. Yeah, it's funny. I've got memories of Anansi stories and the Brer Rabbit stories growing up and some other folk tales. But storytelling was never something that I really took much notice of or thought I'd ever end up doing. So finding myself in the company of these ne'er-do-wells and scamps and rogues is at this point in my life. Yes, John, I do mean you.
I do my best.
is quite an eye-opener for me. So what I do is, I wouldn't say it's necessarily traditional storytelling, because I really don't know what that is anymore. And one of the things that's going to be really interesting for me is the next time I go home, because I've not been back for a while, is to actually look at what's happening with the storytelling tradition back there, because I've become a storyteller in the last 10 years or so. It's been quite an interesting journey. And along the way, I've been fortunate to know people like John and Seth and Shane and, some of these Anglian people, Justine, Hannah, and so on, the great Taffy, of course. And I've been picking up lots and lots of information. And one of the most fascinating things for me is the way themes that emerge from stories that you think, well, I heard that from this person and they told me it was a traditional Irish tale. And then you go talking to somebody else and they say, oh, that's a Scottish tale and it's based on, and they tell you the origin, and then somebody else tells you that, they were in America and they were at a festival and they met a Native American who told them the identical, and it goes on and on and on. And I just find that endlessly fascinating. For example, I love the way John I was thinking about that earlier today. John once did a storytelling about an Anansi tale. And for the life of me, I can't remember the actual story because he started it with how Anansi arrived at Tilbury Docks with the West Indians who came to England in the 1950s. And he hitched a ride to East London and ended up living on a council estate where John met him. And I was laughing so much for about the next 10 minutes every time that image came to mind. I couldn't tell you what story John was telling. And I remembered it today. Again, it's just about how the stories move around and the characters in the stories move around and change and adapt and become adopted by different people in different environments. And the story that I'm about to tell, and I also love when this sort of thing happens because I wasn't sure which story I was going to tell. I was toying with the idea of telling this one. And then Gail, you told the story of Rabbit and Wolf and them trying to provide food for their families. And this is one of those Anansi stories where he doesn't necessarily come out on top. And those are some of the ones that I like the most because we all know Anansi the Trickster, how he outsmarts everyone. When I'm working with young children, I like to use that as a way of getting to them and saying, well, of course, the reason why Anansi is so clever is because he's little. And he's little like you, like you're little. And of course, you're much cleverer than the grown-ups because you can't take them on for size, but you're much cleverer than grown-ups are. But shh, let's not tell the grown-ups. And that always, you know, I'm straight, I'm in there, that's it, I'm good. So this one is one of the ones when Anansi doesn't necessarily have it all his own way. And it's a tale set in the days of hard times when there's starvation across the land. And Anansi hasn't eaten for days, for weeks, weeks upon weeks, going on to months. He's starving, he's nothing but skin and bone. And one day he's walking around and he's looking at everybody else and he's thinking, you know, this world is in a really bad state. Look, nobody cares about anybody anymore. People are only interested in people so they can be nosy about them, so they can get into their business. What we in the West Indies, we call fast. People are too fast. They're not studying other people's business because they're trying to help them. They're just doing it so they can gossip and they can spread rumors. And he decides to do something about this. So he thinks he could turn this to his advantage. So off he goes out into the wilderness and he goes to have a chat with God. And he says to God, Father God, I come here to talk to you about the state of the world. And Father God says, yes, Anansi, what can I do for you? And Anansi says, have you noticed how people have become mean-spirited and vicious and nasty to one another? And all they do is they spread rumor and they spread gossip and they spread slander and libel. And don't you think it's bad? It's terrible. And Father God says, Anansi, I agree. And I've been thinking I must do something. And Anansi says, right, now that's where I can help you. I have a plan. Father God says, go ahead. And Anansi says, I'll go around and I'll seek out the most petty-minded, the most vicious, the nosy, the newsmongers, the scaremongers, the gossip spreaders. I'll find them and I'll eke them out. And all you have to do, when I find one of them and I show him to you, you just take a bolt of, you know, that lightning bolt that you like to bring out at special time. You just bring that lightning bolt down and ka-chang! and you deal with him. And God says, yeah, that's a good plan, Nancy. That can work. So Nancy goes off down to the hardware store and he gets himself a pickaxe and he gets himself a watering can. And off he goes just outside town. And he finds the most barren, the most inhospitable piece of land that he can find. It's nothing but rock and dust and pebbles and sandstone. Nothing's growing on there, not even a blade of grass. And Anansi starts with the pickaxe and he's breaking ground and he's filling the watering can and he's watering the rocks and he's singing away to himself. And who should come along? Brother Foulcock. And Brother Foulcock is a big, strapping fellow, you know, big chest, big, strong, powerful legs. Comes marching down the road as if he owns it. And he sees Anansi there. As soon as Anansi sees him, he doubles up his efforts. And he starts swinging that pickaxe and breaking ground and singing songs and watering away for all he's worth. And he's going, yes, another couple of weeks and this crop should be just ready. And he's smiling and laughing to himself. And Brother Falcock can't help it. He stops and he says, Anansi? Anansi says, yeah. He says, what are you doing? Anansi says, can't you see? I'm tending to my garden. And Brother Falcock goes, Anansi, you've been out here in that hot sun for too long, you know. Can't you see there's nothing but rock and dust and sand and stone? What garden? And no sooner has he said that, Anansi looks up and he goes, and down comes a bolt of lightning, strikes down Brother Falcock dead. Anansi picks him up, puts him on his shoulder, takes him home, boils him, plucks him, butchers him, and Anansi eats well for about a week. And when the last of Brother Falcock is gone, he goes back out to his garden and out with the pickaxe and out with the watering can, and he's breaking ground and he's watering stone. And along comes Brother Goat, trotting along, clip, clop, clip, clop, clip, clop. Anansi, yes? What the hell are you doing? Well, you know the rest by now. So Anansi leads him along, and then when he's ready, just points to Pachang! Lightning bolt, goat stew, curry goat, goat water for about 2 weeks. And so it goes on. And one by one by one, Anansi's decimating the animal population this way. Until Brother John Crow starts getting a bit suspicious. Brother John Crow thinks, what's going on here? And he sees people disappearing left, right, and center. But Anansi's getting fat. And he figures out to himself, let me follow him one day. And he follows Anansi out and he sees Anansi hitting the ground with the pickaxe. And every minute he's looking up the road, looking down the road to see if anybody's coming. And Brother John Crow says, aha, I know his game. And if you don't know what a John Crow is, think about a buzzard or a vulture with the bald, clean head and that long beak. So Brother John Crow doesn't make the mistake the others have. No, sir. He goes back to town. He goes to the stables and he gets himself a fine horse. And then he goes to the hardware store and he gets the best saddle and bridle that he can get and some nice riding boots and a nice suit and, you know, hunting jacket and some jumpers. And he comes riding out in style, man. Riding out right to where Anansi's minding his garden. And he comes riding past. And as he gets close, Anansi looks and he starts working even harder, watering away. And Brother John Crow starts to sing. Ah, young boy, when you go a barber shop, cut your hair just like me. And he takes out a comb from his pocket and starts drawing the comb through his bald head, singing away at the top of his voice. And Anansi stops and he looks. John Crow, barbershop, cut your hair? What hair? And he's just about to open his mouth and say those words when he remembers. And he decides, He hold it down. Brother Janko rides past. All young boy, when you go to a barber shop, cut your hair just like me. And he rides past. And then Nancy's dying, you know, he's dying to ask him, but he holds it down. And the next day, same routine, about 10, 11 o'clock, along comes John Crow on his horse. And he's galloping, and this time he's dancing in the saddle, you know. All young boy, when you go up barber shop, cut your hair just like me. And he's out with the comb and he's running the comb through. And then Nancy runs up to him, and this time he can't help it. He grabs the bridle of the horse, stops the horse in the middle of the road. He said, John Crow, something wrong with you? Cut your hair just like me. John Crow, let me ask you, what hair are you talking about? And no sooner were the words out of his mouth, you know what happened, don't you? Pachang! And that was the end of Nancy right there. And that is the end of my story.
Baden, that was great.
Thank you.
Oh, I love that. No, there's some really great themes coming through, and those connections. I mean, it's kind of a, and I may be well off the mark here, but it appears that through the Caribbean islands that were sort of overrun by the English, a Nazi survives. But the French, it seems to be rabbit, Brer Lupin, or, you know, and when you think of, you know, where the Brer Rabbit, the stories are strongest in the States, it's Louisiana, which had that French influence. So, and I'm thinking of that, so, you know, the trickster that comes across there, or the trickster that survives, given that everything was suppressed. The trickster that survives in different islands is I mean, his hair in the French-speaking ones, and the Nazi. They're probably around in both, but it's interesting. But I love the fact that Crow came in, because that sort of segues me nicely into. Oh, sorry, Gail, do you want to add anything there before we go on? Was there for me? It's that universality, isn't it? That familiar.
I think Gail's muted.
Gail's muted. Unmute Gail. Someone. Bianca, Eliu, unmute Gail. Can't, anyway, don't worry. Right. I can see someone that isn't muted, and we're going to, because I can't. I asked someone earlier if they had a Jack story, and they said no, but I've got a Crow story. And I thought, great, this is a new trickster to me. So, Cass Little, you're going to bring in some of your Welsh crows. Crows are interesting because they're the most intelligent bird, and I think they've got the intelligence of like a 3-year-old child or something like that. But we're getting a bit biological there. So let's welcome Cass. And do you want to tell us about Crow before you start?
Yeah, hiya John. Thank you so much for inviting me. And yeah, it's not strictly a Welsh story, but it's very, very similar to a Welsh story. So there's a great Welsh story that I love. I'm really interested what Gail is saying and Baden is saying about the animal ancestors. So there's a story about the oldest animals in Welsh, the animal ancestors. And there's an Irish story very similar. So this is an Irish story, but it's really like, it's so similar to the Welsh, about the oldest animals. And it starts on a very, very cold May night. So it was freezing, absolutely freezing. The wood was frozen, covered with snow and ice, and it was May. It was May, and it was cold, dark, freezing cold night, and the wind was whistling. An old crow shivered to his old bones, the old crow of Achill. And he was flying over the woods, wondering how he was even going to survive the night, so cold it was. When he heard, cheep, cheep, under the whistling wind, the sound of a little chick in the nest. And he peered down, and it was an eagle's nest. and there was a chick there. But the eagle's nest was deep and big and a good place to shelter from the wind. So he went into the eagle's nest, got rid of the chick, and settled down out of the wind, out of the cold, the biting wind. And he was just having a little bit of a rest from the cold when he heard swoosh, 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 swoosh. Eagle mother coming back to the nest. Now, old Crow did not have a chance to fly. There was no time. So the old trickster, he made himself small, so small, so small, hoping he'd deceive her. And in the dark, his plan worked. She took him for a chick. And he made his beak small, so small. And he gulped down the meat that she brought for her young. And then Mother Eagle tried to settle on the nest to get warm. But it was a bitterly cold night. She just couldn't settle. And she was jumping up and down, ruffling her feathers, complaining about the cold. Meanwhile, the old crow was getting a little bit too warm, because it was almost morning, and as soon as that sun rose, Mother Eagle had discovered just who was in her nest. So Mother Eagle jumping up and down trying to get warm. "I never known such a cold night, such a cold May night as this," she said. And then the crow, old crow, he made his voice small, so small. "There has been, Mother. There's been a colder May night than this." "How would you know? And you've only just come out of your egg." "It's true. There's been a colder May night than this. Ask the old blackbird of the forge." Well, Mother Eagle was amazed. Such knowledge for one so young, but she was intrigued, so she left the nest and flew over the frozen wood, whoosh, 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 and found the old blackbird of the forge under the hawthorn tree, all frozen and covered in snow. "Venerable blackbird," said Mother Eagle, "what brings me here is this. My chick, just out of the egg, claims there's been a colder May night than this, but I cannot believe that's true. Is it?" The old blackbird of the forge said, "I am old. I have been here a long time. When I first came here, there was a mighty iron anvil. Every 7 years, I sharpen my beak against it. The next time I do that, it's going to snap. That's how old I am, but I have never known a colder May night than this." Mother Eagle was satisfied. She thanked the blackbird and she was about to leave when the blackbird said, "But the old bull of the field is older by far than me. Ask the old bull." So Mother Eagle, she flew over the frozen wood to the frozen field, whoosh, 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 and found the old bull of the field, stamping his feet against the cold, solid earth, billowing breath out of his wide, mighty nostrils. "Venerable bull," said Mother Eagle, "what brings me here is this. My chick says there's been a colder May night than this, but I cannot believe it's true. The blackbird asked me to ask you, is it true? Has there been a colder May night?" "I am old," said the bull. "I've been here a long time. Every year I lose 2 of my horns. And every year my horns are turned into a fence. And this field is an acre wide. My horns have made a fence to complete this field, to encircle it. And it needs only 2 more horns for this whole field to be encircled. That's how old I am. And I've never known a colder May night than this." Mother Eagle, satisfied, she went ready to fly back, but The old bull said, but you could ask the blind old salmon of Azaro. He's the oldest of the lot of us. Ask him, he'd know. The eagle, she thanked the bull, and she flew over the frozen field to the frozen river of Azaro. And there in the icy shallows, she saw the salmon, one eye glittering, the other a dark hollow where an eye should be. Venerable salmon, said Mother Eagle, what brings me here is this. My chick says there's been a colder May night than this. I cannot believe it could be true. You are old and wise, is it? Has there been a colder May night than this? The old salmon, old long liver, old memory keeper, was silent for a long time, and then he spoke. It's true. There has been a colder May night, a long, long time ago. It was so cold on that night a long ago that the whole river froze and trapped me in the ice. And it was an hour after dawn when the old crow of Achill came pecking at the ice, pecking and pecking, pecked through the ice, and he pecked out one of my eyes and swallowed it down. I've been blind ever since. Listen, Mother Eagle, that's not your chick in your nest. That's the old crow of Achill himself. It can't be, said Mother Eagle, it can't be. It must be, said the old blind salmon of Azaro. Only the old crow would know of a colder night than this. Oh, Mother Eagle, she thanked the salmon. She flew swiftly over the frozen river, over the frozen field, over the frozen wood. And as the sun rose, she got back to her nest and saw that it was empty. No chick, no crow. As for the old crow of Achill, that old long liver, that old death defier, that old long life survivor, well, he'd lived another day.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Brilliant.
Beautiful. Well, I'm going to ask a couple more people, and then I'm going to open it up for discussion. And we're very lucky, we're very privileged, and at the moment to have with us. Don't go away, Kathleen. We have my favourite, well, cultural literature professor, lecturer from Shriner University down. I can see her. Yeah, I know you. Don't hide. So you can't run now, Kathleen. Kathleen Huston. And I've been, well, when I haven't been in Texas for a few years now, but I generally go down and pop into one of her classes, and she's introduced me to some great people. But I'd like to hear her take on. I'm sure we would like to hear her take, because she knows lots. She's amazing. But and you know, her life story, you know, that's a whole different session. I might bring her back just to talk about her life. And but right now we're going to move from all the tricksters so far have been from the animal from animals, but we're going to move to people, and then to where they manifest themselves right now, you know, how they keep popping into our lives. So I think I'll go to Dave for Jack's story. We've all got Jack stories, but so I'm probably just going to put one in. Brilliant, because I know Tom's got one that lasts about 300 hours, and the more obscure ones that I know probably last for 6 days. And then after Dave, I'm going to bring in Rika from Finland with a you know, she bumped into a trickster the other day, so you know, we got to hear about that. And then we'll open for discuss. You know, well, we'll just have a little you know, little natter about it all, and then maybe when we finish, and just so people know, because we've got you here, Gail, and you know, and you know, you've got the internet for 2 seconds. We might finish with another story from Gail. Is that all right?
Sure.
Thank you very much. It's if anyone wants to sort of mention their story, this might go on all night. You never know. There's, you know what storytellers are like if they get together. But right now, I'm passing across to across to Dave Tong, who's actually got a set. He had a brilliant set today, which is on catch up. Which was fantastic, and he's also coming on in 2 weeks' time. He's coming on live on the magazine session with, and he's talking about how you take history and turn it into, for storytelling. Dave is the king of Tudor and earlier tales from the United Kingdom. He's from Norfolk, which is one so he doesn't make a lot of sense. But that's for you need to be English to understand that, and East Anglian especially. But Dave, let's put our hands together for Dave.
Well, good evening. Can you all hear me? Oh, I've come. There's a big me on there. I don't want to look at a big me. That's a little me now. Yeah, it's interesting what John was saying about, tricksters and bringing them forward. And even though I specialised, like we all do, in stories long ago, I think their popularity is linked certainly in the human tricksters. I mean, they're the common man. They're fighting against the powers that be, and we're all doing that still even to this day. And so I think with a lot of the trickster tales in human forms, they're not necessarily trickster tales, but they have elements of the trickster in them. I mean, Robin Hood is a good example of that. He's a classic trickster in his way, always wearing disguises. Hereward the Wake, Eustace the monk. And interestingly enough, they were all outlaws. They were all outside the law. They were all fighting against the big men at the top. And so you do get an element of that in some Jack tales as well. And what I like about some of these tricksters and some of the Jack stories as well is that they subvert your expectations. And so in many ways, the trickster is kind of linked to the fool as well. And it's that very power they have to see the world in a very different way that allows them to get one over on the rest of us. Does that make sense? Give us a thumbs up if you think that's right. Yeah. Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully if you're thinking that's a load of rubbish, I'll be able to persuade you with this tale. And this is a story of an old farmer. He'd lost his wife many years before. Where she was, I cannot say. She could have been dead. She could have run off with a milkman. Who knows? He'd lost his wife many years before, but still he had 2 full-grown sons. Now, they were boys alike in look, but they were very different in their natures. The eldest boy was called John, and John was always up with the lark. John was up before the first cockcrow of the morning. In fact, it was often said of John that he would rise early just to ensure that the cockerel had awoken so it could awaken everyone else. And so for the purpose of this story, we shall call him Lusty John. Lusty in the medieval sense, not in the modern sense, if you get my meaning. But his younger brother, well, if you heard my set earlier, you will have heard me use this phrase. His younger brother was called Jack, and Jack was a tardy-gated bed presser. He was wedded to his mattress, stayed in his bed all day long. The old farmer didn't like it, and often he would compare Jack unfavorably with John. He would go up to the boy's chamber, and he would say, Jack, Jack, you should be more like John. But did Jack listen? Of course he didn't. He would simply stretch and yawn. He would turn over in his bed. He would turn his head to the wall and go straight back to sleep. Well, it was winter, and John rose early, as was his way. And he went to plough the whole of the bottom field. And because Lusty John started early, he finished early. And when he got home and told his father, the old man was overjoyed, but angry that Jack had not helped. Once again, the old farmer went to Jack's chamber and he said, Jack, Jack, this day, John, he has ploughed the whole of the bottom field. You, Jack, should be more like John. But Jack did not listen. Instead, he stretched, he yawned, he turned over in his bed and he went straight back to sleep. Well, winter ended. Next came spring. It saw John up early again, this time to broadcast seed all over the field. He sowed the whole of the bottom field. And because John started early, he finished early. And because he finished early, his father was pleased. But again, the old man was angry that Jack hadn't helped. He went straight to Jack's chamber, and the old farmer said, Jack, you should be more like John, for this day he has seeded the whole of the bottom field. You, Jack, should be more like John. But did Jack listen? Of course he didn't. He stretched, he yawned, he turned over in his bed, and he went straight back to sleep. Well, summer followed spring, and it was late summer, for there was a waft of wood smoke in the air telling everyone that autumn was on its way. And it found John up even earlier. This day, he was harvesting the bottom field. And because he started early, he finished early. And because he finished early, again, the old farmer was overjoyed, but angry that Jack hadn't helped. And so once again, he went to Jack's chamber and he said, Jack, you should be more like John, for this day he has harvested all our crops. You, boy, should be more like John. But did Jack listen? Of course he didn't. He simply stretched, he yawned, he turned over in his bed, and he went straight back to sleep. And that was the way it continued. John rising early, Jack pressing his bed. Know this, John, he was such a lusty fellow, he even rose early when he had no need. And this was a particularly cruel winter's morning early. Mother Winter, she had wrapped herself around the land like an icy cloak, and yet still John was up, walking through the deep snow, leaping over the frosty, icy streams, climbing tall bare trees, just because they were there. But as the sun rose, his belly barked loudly. It was time for his breakfast. John walked home. But as he followed the track around the bottom of the lower field, he came across a great chest of gold. It had fallen from a merchant's cart that very early morning, and now it lay spilling its contents onto the side of the track. Quickly, lusty John, he scooped it up, he heaved that chest on his back, and he took it home. He threw it down on the ground, and his father was overjoyed. They were as rich can be, and you can't get much richer than that. Still, he was unhappy that Jack hadn't helped carry the load. He picked up the great chest of gold. He heaved it upstairs to Jack's chamber. He slammed it down on the floor, waking Jack. And the old man said, Jack, you should be more like John. For he rose so early this day, he's found some gold that has dropped off the back of a merchant's cart, and now we are rich. You, Jack, should be more like John. Jack stretched and yawned. He turned over in his bed, but this day he did not go to sleep. For the sun was spilling in through the window. It was playing upon the golden coins in the chest, so that golden dancers spun and twirled on the wall just above Jack's head. He blinked, he stretched, he yawned. He looked at the gold, and he looked at his father. And Jack spoke. The first time he'd spoken for a while, because words take effort. We storytellers know that. And he said, but father, think on it this way. If that merchant who'd lost that gold had stayed in bed as I do now, he wouldn't have lost the gold in the first place, would he? If that merchant was as lazy as me, he would not now be poor. And with that, Jack, he stretched, he yawned, he turned over in his bed, and he went straight back to sleep.
Love that, Dave. Brilliant.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Oh, fantastic. Now we've got Norfolk's almost in a majority at the moment, because I saw Andrew down the corner there. So there's there's an expression I can never remember because it's from north of the Waveney, and it's for a lazy girl, and I think it's something like slightly more than.
Yeah, that's it.
Is that it? Have I got it right? That's just a little thing there. Now, definitely not a slightly more. Is we're going over. We're going to the forest now. We're going to the forest up north, and Rika, you bumped into a trickster yesterday, the other day, didn't you?
Ah,
Yes, yes.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, of course, we have in Finland also the traditional tricksters. And for us, the traditional animal trickster is a fox, a cunning fox. And we have a sort of jack stories as well. But as one thing that I always think is that folk stories shouldn't be just old ones. So it should be like alive, and we should kind of find new ones or see new ones, experience new stories. I was experiencing that coming midnight sun, which is in my eyes. Yeah, and yes, sometimes I meet strange things in the woods, and one of the most tricky creatures there are in the woodlands are the fairies who are taking care of mushrooms. So I have to explain that in Finland we have the so-called everyman's right, which means that if there is woodlands, we are allowed to go there. We can walk, we can pick up mushrooms, we can pick up berries. If we camp or make a fire, then we need to ask for the permission from the landowner. But otherwise, we can just go wherever there is woodlands. We are allowed to go there. And as a wee hobbit myself, I absolutely love mushrooms. It's a delicacy. Mushrooms normally they appear in the autumn, but this time of the year there is one particular specimen of fungi that can be found. It's very rare, very delicate, and absolutely venomous. So if you don't cook it right, you are dead. It's really, really poisonous. And around here where I live, I have never found a good place for these mushrooms. They are very, very tricky. And with all the mushrooms, I have realized that the mushroom fairies, they have long skirts, and the skirts are wide, long, green. And if you don't behave well in the woodlands, if you are not polite to the fairies, they will just sit down on their bum and they spread the skirts and they just hide all the mushrooms. You can't find anything. You need to know how to kind of handle the fairies, and then they might present you with some mushrooms. It was just this week, Thursday morning, I went to the woods. And my meaning was not at all to find mushrooms. My meaning was to practice stories. I always do it in the woods because I have a live stream in the library tomorrow. And I was just walking there and going through my story. And all of a sudden I realized that in front of me, in the middle of a path, the path that I had just walked the previous day and dozens of times before, and it's not at all a typical place for mushrooms, but there was amazing, a size of my fist, a beautiful false morel. Mwah! Wonderful. Of course I picked it up. It was just the one. Well, I thought that, okay, well, they are very fleshy ones, so maybe I can make myself a nice stew out of only one. I continued my walking, and after 2 hours, I came out from the forest and I bumped into another one. So now I had two. And I was so happy. Wow, it's seasonal food because I like to eat seasonal food. I was already like drooling and feeling the taste of the mushrooms in my mouth when I heard the mushroom fairies. Mushroom fairies were telling me that, don't you remember we have an agreement? Manners in picking up mushrooms. You are always supposed to present away part of the first mushrooms of the season. Don't you remember? And I said, yes, I remember that. But like, these are so rare, and I mean, I only have 2. And everybody in my neighborhood, they either have families or couples, and you just can't, like, if I give one away, they don't do anything with that. So I might as well just eat it myself. And the mushroom fairy said that, no, we have a deal. You need to give away some of your mushrooms. So I came home and I was really, really pondering and like having a fight with myself that what should I do? What should I do? But then I thought that, okay, I don't want to upset the fairies. So we have one new neighbor. It's a couple, and they don't know about the forest lands here, so they couldn't probably find their own mushrooms. So I took both of them and gave them to the neighboring lady. And oh boy, she was happy. She was over the moon. Oh, she was taking a photograph of them and putting in Facebook, telling that I had the best neighbor in the world. And I thought that maybe it was worth of losing the 2 mushrooms. And the next morning, when I went for my walk, I was suspecting to get a reward, to get plenty of those false morels. And I go into the forest and I even start looking, and not just like doing the walking, but I go to places where they might be growing, and I'm looking and searching, and not a single one, nada. And I get a bit angry because I gave away everything and now I don't get anything back. What about our deal? I was asking the fairies. And the fairies say that, you are greedy. We don't give you any mushrooms because, you know, you have still some left in your deep freezer from the previous year. You eat those first. And I was like, no, I don't. Yeah, you do. End of the conversation from the fairy side. Well, I went back home. I went to search in my deep freezer, and I had just had to rearrange it because my parents moved to the center of the village, and I had to pack their things and my things and my daughter's things. And when I went through all the baskets there in the deep freezer, indeed, between the strawberries, there was one little box of previous year's false morels. Right. I took it off, I melted it, I made my stew, so I had cleaned my deep freezer, and Saturday morning, I go into the forest, and I even reminded them that not only I have given the first ones away, I have eaten the ones that were in the deep freezer. And you know, this is my birthday. What about it? And I continue my walk. I found one, I found next one, third one, fourth one. I was trying to put them to the hem of my shirt, but they were too many, absolutely too many. And on the same area where I had been the previous day. And I luckily had the scarf around my neck, so I unwrapped a scarf and made a bag out of that, and I got a huge bag full of top quality false morels for my birthday party. And that was the kind thing of them to do. But sometimes if you don't know how to behave, you might end up in trouble. And the one thing you need to remember, when you find mushrooms and you pick them up, before you leave the forest, you need to bow and say, thank you. And thank you for your time.
And
That
thank
was
you, Rika, for that. Brian, marvelous. Right, Kitos.
Lovely.
Right, now, let me go
Lovely.
on to my, as Kathleen hasn't run away, she went, she turned off her video for a minute. Can someone unmute Kathleen, please? Kathleen, are you with us?
Yes,
Fantastic.
I
You're-
was.
Well, yeah.
Right there. What?
You're having fun with your video, aren't you?
I'm hitting it once, but it appears somebody else is hitting it. There we go.
There we
No,
go.
no.
Yeah.
No, I was
Yeah.
just getting ready to have to run, but I'm just so excited to be with this group. And thank you, John.
Ah, good to see you.
And Gail, good to
Yes.
see you.
Ah,
And we're
Right.
sitting here in Kerrville, Texas, where the Kerrville Folk Festival has been canceled, and all kinds of ripples going out, and people trying to figure out ways to celebrate. We had a big storm, we had rain. John, you know what that means, Gail.
Yeah, I've been.
But yeah, don't be introducing me as somebody who knows anything, John. What I like in my introduction is I've had a lot of experiences. I've had a really rich life, and I just finished a mythology class at Shriner, and I had to go online, which was hard for me. And John has visited all of my classes at Shriner. So he's been to mythology and children's lit and creative writing. Right, John?
That's it. Yeah. So your take on what you've heard today or tonight?
Well, when this person moved into leadership in the country where I live, and there was so much upset, as there still is, and there's a lot of upset around me and the people that I'm involved with, lots of big major upset, like, how could this happen? What's happening? What's happening? How does anybody do this? And I just won't go any further than that. Those of you that have an imagination, you know, maybe you've had a leader of a country, you wanted to say, what happened? So, thank you. But I use the trickster motif. I use the idea that sometimes something comes along that just breaks everything up. And then, of course, I go back to Leonard Cohen. There's a crack in everything. That's where the light goes in. So I have used the archetype of the trickster in a way to look at what's happening around me today. And I'm not upset. And I have this sort of organic sense that things fall apart and come together and fall apart and come together. And this particular kind of energy is revealing some pretty big cracks.
Yeah.
So
So
that's my trickster connection.
yeah, well, yeah, and I really like the way it's you know, that stories in general help us to make sense of the world, which is kind of why, partly why we're doing this and why we've made this huge world community of storytellers. We're not the only ones, but we're putting on twice daily storytellers from all over the world. And but part of that is I think that more than ever the world needs stories right now. You know, not just deep and meaningful ones, but story, even stories are always multi-layered anyway, even ones that are amusing, you know, have got those multi-layers. And you can, you know, it's like a good children's television program. A good children's television program appeals to adults as well, because it's got loads of layers. And so, I mean, when I think of storytelling, I always think of it as family. I don't think, you know, if you look at the pictures of the Cherokees in Ireland, the photographs from the 50s, it had everything, you know, the old boy would roll in a little village, and there'd be everything from the babe in arms to great grandmother listening. And so I think, thank you, Kathleen. So you know, you brought up the importance of stories, and yeah, I've been going out for walks with I haven't had a face mask on. I've had one of my Texas scarves up around my mouth. So, anyway, anyone else want to chip in?
Just want to say hi to Kathleen. I haven't seen her in so long.
I know. Gail was part of my classes too,
Yeah.
as well as my experience with Kerrville and storytelling.
Well, before I moved up here to where I am now, I lived not far from Kathleen. We all lived in the hill country. I was very close to the festival for many, many years. And I'm just brokenhearted that it's not happening this year, but next year.
Next year.
Next year. Yeah, well, the festivals all over the world are saying next year. We're thinking, and it is definitely going to happen. We'll have a big storytelling festival in Marrakesh, because Marrakesh is where this whole site is grown from, really, because Mike Woods, who and Lucy, whose whole idea of this site was, we're going to open a storytelling center in Marrakesh, and they have hotels down there, riads, and Marrakesh has been in lockdown for months now, and so this site was sort of put on as a you know, one, to keep everyone working, and two, and as a precursor for the center, for the storytelling center. And what we're hoping for eventually is as well as having live storytelling, we'll take this idea, you know, what this crisis has given us is new approaches to how we can share stories. I mean, before, because we were so wedded to the idea of live and having the audience, the idea of having storytellers from all over the world became, you know, you had to fly them in, you know, and it was like, can we scrape together, you know, beatniks like me would scrape together the airfare and sort of just go and, you know, busk a bit round and hope, you know, maybe, you know, get in touch with Kathleen and say, you got a lecture for me, and piece all that.
Any money?
You know, you'd get on the plane and hope it worked out. You know, other people get booked for, well, and I must confess, I've been around, had some good trips paid for, but in my life. But this is a whole, you know, this opens up a whole new aspect. It's not replacing live. It's in addition to live, and once this is all over, we'll have a whole new aspect that we can add on. Before I go, Norman, you got any tricksters up in Canada? You're Canada, aren't you, Norman?
I had to unmute myself.
Yeah.
We have lots of tricksters. It's a big country.
Yeah, I know.
And in fact, for First Nations, it's hard even to pin down a name for trickster, like Boujou, Nanabojo, Nanabush, and all that sort of thing from the First Nations. But as far as tricksters go for settlers, I'm blanking right now. Maybe they're hiding from me.
There's the one called Biggie.
Yeah.
Well, I went to Vancouver Island for the first time a couple of years ago, and I'd never, the First Nation. I mean, there's like 16 different nations, and the First Nation, and I'd never been able to get my head round, because they're very unusual, because it's coastal and it's fishing, and only when I went there and walked it could I envisage but tremendous the number of tricksters there.
There are
one island and there's 16, 16 different varieties. Anyone else want to chip in?
What?
Oh, sorry, Norman, go on. Sorry.
One last thing I wanted to say. I'm borrowing this from Ron Evans. He said, Ron says, the tricksters and ours are not, they are also teachers. We are there to learn from their bad behavior, but that they love getting into things just to see what it does and works and see if they can improve it. Usually a big mistake on the part of the trickster, but they have a complex role here in storytelling. And that I finish.
Norman.
Yes.
Is Ron doing well?
Last I heard, he is okay, but that's a good question to ask. I could ask Dan Yashinsky. I think he's been staying at Dan's.
Oh,
So,
really?
yeah.
I'll call Dan then. Ron and I adopted one another as brother and sister well over 30 years ago.
Right.
And I haven't been able to see him. The last time we were supposed to get together, he got sick.
Oh.
But
he was supposed to be part of the festival about 3 weeks ago. The one, like everybody else's, is canceled. But and he was supposed to be in it. So, and as of then, he was in good shape. So
good. Well,
give Dan a call.
It's all, I mean, that's another great thing, is we can get news of each other through this by accident almost. And so I'm gonna, does anyone else want to drop in with anything? Put your hand up if you do. Dave.
Yeah, I mean, all I've got to say is taking up on Norman's point, saying about the bad behaviour of tricksters. But you know what? I very rarely see it as bad behaviour on their parts. Because in most of certainly the trickster tales that I tell, they're very much playing upon the foolishness, the greed of others, vanity, all of those things, all of those bad traits. And so, that they're just exploiting our failings rather than having failings themselves in many ways. I suppose I'd see it like that anyway. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I've just used them as a guidebook to life. It's and I'm just smiling. Anyway, Gail, would you like to? Is anyone else before I bring in Gail for a final story?
Not a story.
No, okay, so sorry, did someone else say something?
No, I just wanted to just make a comment to Rika. And again, it's going back to that point about how a story can take you somewhere completely different, because while her story was going along, I was wandering along towards a completely different ending, which I may probably pursue, which ended up with her neighbor getting poisoned. A much darker version, which has nothing to do with Rika's story, but there was a pathway that led off from there.
You're just evil, Baden. I love that bit about the fact that it's not, that there's new stories coming all the time. I mean, about 15 years ago, I was walking up in Lapland, in the very north, about 100k north of the Arctic Circle, and there was there was a cotter was put there for tourists to come in, but I used to walk around, so I'd wander in between the tourists, and I'd sit down, and the guides used to call me Walking Man, and because I'd sort of be the strange character walking in out the snow with my cowboy hat, and they'd tell me, and I'd been getting sort of shaman stories from the area, but they sat me down, they told me, they gave me this one. It's just really short, and they said it's there was a television company wanted to build a television mast next to a big lake, and the local people turned around and said, "You don't want to do that. there's the spirit of the shaman lives in that lake. And he's going to be very upset. But you can imagine how much notice television executives took of that sort of thing. So they built the mast anyway. And hardly it had been up that it fell down. So they put it up again. Hardly it had been up and it fell down. So before they put it out for a third time, I turned to local people and said, look, you know, actually, we don't actually, you know, we feel a bit silly asking you this, but what, you know, what do we do? And they said, well, you've got to make an offering to the spirit of the shaman who lives in the lake. So they took a brand new television set and they threw it in the lake. And from that moment on, that mast has been there ever since.
Mhm.
And after that little bit of silliness, can we put our hands together and bring back, while Gail's still got some internet, let us not waste this moment.
This this story is for Baden. Talking about combing. You're not going to believe this, but in the beginning days of the world, Buzzard was good looking. He was so handsome. He had a suit of shiny black feathers that flashed in the sun. That's where he got that habit of circling like he does, because he could tilt his wings and tilt his wings, and the sun would flash off his feathers, and everybody would look up and say, gosh, that buzzard is good looking. He was so vain, though, with the shiny black feathers and the white curling top knot of feathers that came down the side of his head. He wouldn't help the other big birds with one of their most important jobs. You probably know this. The big birds eat dead animals. When something got squished by the side of the road in the beginning days, it was crow, raven, hawk, even eagle would come down and eat that dead animal. That helps clean up the earth. But Buzzard would never help. He would say, ew, it's got little crawly things in it. It's all green and gushy. Smells bad. No, it's not good enough for me. And the other birds decided what Buzzard needed was an attitude adjustment. So they went the rabbit, because nobody thinks up better tricks than Rabbit. Now, the funny thing is, this is the way Rabbit behaves himself all the time. But when he heard how Buzzard was acting, he was like, oh, no, 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 no. We'll teach him a lesson. Now, Rabbit went to Buffalo, and he told Buffalo exactly what he wanted him to do. And then Rabbit told the other birds what Buffalo was doing. Now, what Buffalo was doing was climbing to the top of the mountains in the Smokies, where the Cherokee people come from. Some of them, you get above the tree line and they're just bald. You can be seen from the air for many miles. So that's what Buffalo did. He climbed up that mountain. He came out on top of that mountain and he started staggering around, drooling all over himself like he was sick, swaying back and forth like he was dizzy. And then he dropped to the ground, rolled over on his side, twitched a little, and then he held real still. And hawk and raven and crow and eagle, they gathered around that buffalo, and Buzzard began spiraling down just to see what was happening.
And the others began to call up to him, Buzzard, Buffalo's dead. Buffalo's big, Buzzard. You get down here. It'll take all of us to eat up a buffalo. Well, Buzzard circled a time or two, and he noticed that buffalo looked pretty fresh. He looked like he hadn't been dead very long at all. Shoot, he probably still tasted good. So he thought he could get a free lunch and get everyone off his back all at the same time. So he landed next to that buffalo and he told all the others, now, since I am the best looking, I get to eat first. Now, this is an honor he was asking for. Whenever Indian people come together and it involves a meal, and pretty much whenever Indian people come together, it involves a meal. It's always the elders, the honored ones, that are served first. And so the other bird said, Buzzard, you go right ahead. Now, this was an honor Buzzard was asking for, to eat first. But of course, he also wanted the best for himself. Now, maybe you haven't butchered a buffalo in the last week or two, anybody? So you might not know this. Buffalo has a strip of fat that runs up the back of his leg. It's very tasty. That's where Buzzard went first. And he's using that big, strong beak. He started pecking at the back of that buffalo's leg. Buffalo just held as still as he could, and he waited while Buzzard pecked higher and higher. And when that buffalo decided that Buzzard was in just the right place, he opened up his butt, leaped backward, and slammed it shut on Buzzard's head. And then he got up and he began to run, dragging Buzzard all around the circle, bouncing along in the dirt. Buzzard was screaming for Buffalo to turn loose, but Buffalo just clamped down tighter and ran faster. After a while, Rabbit turned to the others and he said, I bet he's learned his lesson. So when Buffalo dashed by, Rabbit reached out, grabbed his feet, and popped him loose. Took every white feather off Buzzard's head. You don't see a buzzard with that beautiful curling white top knot of feathers, just that ugly red naked head. And Buzzard learned his lesson. Dead meat is all he eats. And he waits till it's rotten. He wants to make sure it's really dead. And that whole experience is why buzzards stink so bad to this very day.
Whoa. Yeah, we're not talking West Country British buzzards there. We're talking turkey vultures.
I always worry. I always worried whether, especially like when I was coming over to do Beyond the Borders, and David very graciously booked a week for me in the Welsh schools before I came over, and I would find myself launching into one of the stories that American kids would know immediately: possum or otter, or any of the other animals, and I would always catch myself short. Do they have that here? Do they know who that is? So
yeah, it's. But I mean, our buzzard is much more raptor rather than vulture. So it's anyway. Thank you, Gail, Kath, Dave, Rika, Baden, and anyone else who's put in tonight. And Kathleen, thank you for joining us. I will be harassing you for more on that. Norman, I want to set up you sometime.
Yes. I've been going through. I'm going to go through a lot of changes in the last couple of weeks, and part of it is my relationship to the stories I tell. So I call it, and part of it is technical. I don't want to put on a really bad presentation tech-wise, and I haven't, because of the shutdown, I've been having trouble in that respect.
That's okay. You're forgiven.
Thank you.
The whole point of this is relax. You know, it should be fun, right? So,
yeah. Thank you.
Thank everyone. We're on twice a day, stories twice a day, fresh set every day, but it's all available on catch up. So if it's a ludicrous time of day, we are aware that we have people from all over the world. So at this moment, you know, our Indian tell us it's the middle of the night for them. And our Southeast Asian, it's the middle of, you know, I'm full of admiration for North America that can act like it's evening when in fact they should be just on their third cup of coffee. So thank you very much. We got this magazine program will be every Monday night. There'll be a different theme each Monday. I was going to do the history for next, how stories can be worked into history for next Monday, but it's the Monday after because someone I wanted isn't available till then. I'm not sure what next Monday's theme is, but it's going to be great. There's live stuff and all the time. You know, there's stuff coming from Morocco every Thursday night. You know, which is the heart of the, you know, the project. So, and thank you all, Julio and Bianca, for working the technology, which we have no idea about ourselves.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night,
Have a good night.
Good
Thanks,
night.
John.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye, bye, bye.
to meet you all. Nice to see you, Dave. Take care.
You all.
See you, Baden.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Yourselves.
Bye.
Gail?
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thank
It's so
you.
good to see everybody in person.
Brilliant stuff. Okay, stay well.
You all be well
Bye-bye.
as well.
Yes, as well.
I'm going for my
Okay.
4th cup of coffee.
I'm gonna have dinner.